Hey YouTube, Decimate here. This is going to be another video on Faction Wars, and today we're going to cover the Demonspawn. So I've gone ahead and pulled up the index here for Demonspawn, and as you can see, I am severely lacking in the Legendary category. The only one I've got is Lord Shazar, and he did end up making it onto my team, but solely as a damage dealer. He's not really bringing a lot of utility to the fight. And he is easily replaceable with anyone you've got, including other epics, maybe even a rare. He really just doesn't bring anything to the fight other than damage. He does output some decent damage, but I had to kind of tank him up and put him in lifesteal just to keep him alive. So if you've got somebody else, I would recommend using them over Lord Shazar. I did get him to work, but he's not ideal. Demonspawn has a lot of great legendary champions that I don't have, but any of these are going to be usable for this faction, and they've got some awesome ones for a lot of other areas of the game as well. Everybody knows Prince Kaimar. He's amazing, resets your cooldowns. He does have the sleep on his A2, which, like we've gone over in other videos, isn't the best debuff for Faction Wars, but it can come in handy. And then he's got some poisons on his A1, which can do some damage to the boss and also to the waves. Tyrant is great, offers a little bit of team protection on his passive. He's got an ally protection and increased defense. And then HP burns, AoEs, he's great for damage. We've got Drexthar, who a lot of us will be getting eventually if you're able to buy the champion fragments in the arena. He's good for damage. He's got the provokes, not the best chance of laying it until you do get some of those HP burns out there, but CC is great, so he could definitely come into your team as well. We've got Canderfawn, or Squidward as we like to call him in Claw. He's going to be there for damage. He's a little easier to keep alive than some of your other raw damage dealers, as he can put this veil on himself, and will also put that veil on himself with his passive. So he could come into your team as a damage dealer as well. Mor2 is probably one of the weaker Demonspawn legendaries. He is 100% usable for Faction Wars. He's got pretty good stats as far as HP. He's an HP based champion. Decent speed, nothing great. Doesn't bring a ton of utility as far as CC or healing or anything like that, but he can be there to do some damage and just as kind of a tank for you. If you do get lucky enough to unlock Peril, it is a big hit, so that's always nice when that unlocks, but it's hard to get that to work. Then we got Lord Shazar. Probably seen him in Arena. He lays bombs, does a lot of damage with those bombs. You could put him in a stun set. I didn't end up doing that. He does have the AoE on this bomb ability. That could work. And then he's got a 3-hitter here, which if you've got, say, Giant Slayer, that might end up doing a little bit more damage for you. Most people are probably going to build him for the arena. I have seen him in some pretty crazy clan boss builds as well. So if you've got that, maybe he can do some work with that Giant Slayer, but most likely if you've got him, you're going to build him for arena. Then we come to the faction MVP. This faction is one of the ones where if you have one specific champion, it becomes a lot easier to do, and that is Duchess. Everybody wants her. She's amazing for arena, clan boss, any of the dungeons. She's just fantastic in every area of the game. She is the only one that I can think of that's got a revive in the faction, which for Faction Wars is clutch. So if you don't have her, you need to figure out how to keep everybody alive. She's also got a block debuffs ability, which for the boss is great, for the waves it's great. She just makes the faction a cakewalk pretty much. And I've had a clanmate that did it with Duchess and 2 Soul Drinkers. Soul Drinker is another bomb champion, doesn't get a lot of play, and he places bombs if he dies. And I guess he was using both of them at level 50 and just letting them die and then having the bombs go out, and then Duchess just picked them back up, and he beat 21 with that strategy. So if you have Duchess, it opens up a lot more possibilities for your team structure, and you can use people that you might not be able to use otherwise if you've got her one day. Next we've got Krutrexa, which she's an amazing damage dealer. She doesn't do a whole lot else. She does have some buff strip on her, let's see, yeah, on her A2 here, which can also play as a weaken. If you do end up bringing her in, she's going to be there mostly for the damage, and she does that very well. Kind of a one-trick pony, but she definitely gets the job done damage-wise. And then we've got a Neithwi, really cool champion for Arena. Kind of in the same category as Shazar. You're probably going to have him built for Arena if you've got him. He can come in and do some damage for you, but that's mostly what he's going to be there for. He can place this leech, which can give your team a little bit of healing. What else do you have here? Just attack, basically. He's a damage dealer, and when he kills things, they stay dead. So that's nice. Not a whole lot of revives going on in the faction wars. That's not usually a huge thing that you're looking for. But as some raw damage, he can come in and do some work for you. Next, I think I want to talk about a couple of the rares. We've got two good options in the rares, nothing in the uncommons, but if you haven't eaten every single one of these that you've ever gotten, which most of us have, and you've actually leveled up one of these Diabolists, she's actually pretty good for faction wars and definitely a good champion for mid-early game arena and also dungeons. She's got some increased speed and attack all enemies. Anytime you see that, you maybe think Sunset could be useful. And then she's also got a turn meter fill and a decreased turn meter for all the enemies. I've seen her clear 21. Some of my clanmates have cleared 21 with her. She doesn't have the greatest defense, decent health, great speed. I don't know if you'd be able to get away with her at 50 if you don't have a Duchess to pick her back up. But if you do have her already maxed out, or if you don't have any other better options, she is definitely available very easily from a stage we all farm constantly in this game. The other rare I'd like to call out is going to be Fellhound, and he actually did make it on my team all the way up till 21. Up till stage 20, I got away with using him as a 50. I couldn't keep him alive on 21 throughout the boss fight. So I did end up having to max him out to 60, but it was worth it to get the faction done, and he's a great champion otherwise. He is known as a campaign farmer for this A1. It's an AoE, it's got a really fast attack animation, and that's what makes him one of the faster campaign farmers out there. As an added bonus, it's got this chance to lay a decreased speed, and his other main ability here is going to be this A2, which when booked goes down to a 2-turn cooldown. And it has a small version of continuous heal and a reflect damage. The reflect damage is good for Fire Knight. That's another area where he's used in the game. It doesn't deal a ton of damage against enemies attacking you, but it's kind of an added bonus on this heal, which is what we're really after. This being on a 2-turn cooldown means this heal is going to be up a lot, even though it's a small version. And because of that, I would actually argue that he's one of the better options for healing in this faction. His A3 is going to place a block damage buff on an ally for 1 turn. This is a little hit or miss on whether it's going to be useful for you. Your team is going to be running pretty fast, especially by the later stages of faction wars. So I found that more often than not, I ended up outrunning this buff, and it didn't end up doing much for me. And I usually ended up going with the A1 instead, even when this was up. Unless I could see that somebody was, maybe they'd just taken their turn and they were probably going to be targeted. You can try to throw this up and negate some of that damage. But this A1 with a stun set on is money for faction wars, and the A2 is awesome. Next, we'll talk about the epics, and first up we've got Allure. Allure is amazing for Fire Knights. She's good for some of the other dungeons as well. And she is amazing for faction wars, especially the boss fights. She's good for the waves and the levels in between the boss fights, but for the boss fights, she is one of the best champions in the game. And that is all due to her A1 here. It's a 3 times at random attack, which isn't great for the waves when you still got 5 enemies up, but when it starts to get pared down a little bit and you've only got 2 or 3 enemies left, she will be doing a lot of turn meter reduction on those enemies that are left. Each hit can reduce turn meter by 25%. Has to be a crit, so you do have to max out our crit. She is a little gear intensive because of the need for the max crit. You want her going really fast. You also need her fairly tanky, and she's got a pretty low base defense. So she's a little hard to gear out well, but she is probably necessary for the boss. I'm not going to say that with 100% certainty, but I think almost every team I've seen that beat Faction Wars 21 had an allure on the team, and some people have even gone with 2 allures. That A1 is awesome. Her A2 is so-so. It does put out the small version of decreased defense and can put out a sleep for you. I used it occasionally if nobody really had turn meter that I was worried about. You can throw out the decreased defense possibly and speed up the run a little bit. Not a huge deal. She's mostly going to be there for her A1. And her A3 is just kind of a pure damage dealing ability. It does ignore some defense, but more often than not, you're going to have your allure build out to be fast and a little bit tanky and high crit rate, but not necessarily bumping that attack way up. So she's not going to be there for damage. I almost always just went with the A1 instead of that A3. Amazing champion for Faction Wars and pretty good elsewhere in the game, so if you've got her, definitely build her up. Next we've got Excruciator. She's one of the few epic champions that I don't actually have. She's great for dealing damage. For Faction Wars, that's not really what you're looking for 99% of the time. But if you've got her and you've got her maxed out, she might come in, do a little damage for you. That'd be a good thing. If you've already got the healing and CC covered and you've got a slot for a pure damage dealer, she could come in there for you. Kind of in the same spot that my Shazar was in for my team. Araness, not a great champion for Faction Wars or really anywhere else. She can be an okay clan boss champion, but that's kind of her only spot, and she's really been overshadowed by a lot of the other poisoners that have come out after her. So if you've got her, she might be able to come into your team, but I wouldn't recommend building her for Faction Wars specifically. Next up we've got Soul Drinker, one of the bomb champions. He is a good bomb champion, but unfortunately bomb champions just aren't that great in general. Like I mentioned earlier, if you've got a Duchess, he could really come in handy. He does lay a lot of bombs, and when he dies, he lays more bombs. So you could just have him dying, lay on those bombs, and have a Duchess bring him back. That could work out pretty well. Other than that, I probably wouldn't recommend bringing him to Faction Wars if you don't have the Duchess on your team. But he can be a fun champion for Arena, not a top strategy in my opinion. Bombs just aren't that great in this game right now, unfortunately. But that might change some point in the future, and maybe we'll see more Soul Drinker. Next up we've got Nizana. Nizana's another one that was on my team. She's got all AoE attacks, and she does have a great A2, which is a ally protection, and placed a pretty sizable shield on herself so that she can kind of negate some of that damage that's coming in from the ally protect. She's another great candidate for a stun set, again, because she's got this A1 that's an AoE, and then her A3 that's also an AoE that also can place a 50% decreased attack debuff, which is very nice for Faction Wars. So I didn't end up actually having her in a stun set until stage 21 to deal with the second Valk wave there, which is a real pain if you just can't keep them locked down. So great champion. She can be used elsewhere in the game. I would say Faction Wars is probably her strongest area. I've actually seen her used all the way up in Plat Arena as a protection champion, but I don't really use her anywhere else other than Faction Wars. But she's great for that. Next up we've got Infernal Baroness, another AoE champion. Demonspawn is definitely not lacking in AoE champions. She does have a small heal on this A1, and I used her for a while at 50. The healing is pretty underwhelming, and I don't think you're gonna get a huge value out of her on that heal A1. She is defensive based, so she's a little easier to keep alive. She is an AoE champion, as mentioned, so you can throw a stun set on her. She'll do some work for you. Probably mid-tier for Faction Wars. I wouldn't say she's a must-have by any means. But she's also got the decreased attack on one of her other abilities, and then she can put out a veil on somebody if you're worried about dying with her A3. That is helpful. but again, mid-tier at best. Next we've got the new-ish champion now, I guess, Tanix. We're all going to get her through the login rewards. You've probably already gotten her. She is underwhelming for me. I did try her briefly at 50, but honestly, Fellhound at 50 was doing a better job for me, and I chose to max out the Fellhound as opposed to her. She's just kind of hard to get going. She's got the okay heal on her A1, but you have to really bump up her HP to get anywhere close to a decent heal out of this, and then you're kind of neglecting her attack, and so she's not dealing that much damage, and really the only other thing she's offering is this decreased speed, which Fellhound also has. And Fellhound also has that 2-turn cooldown on his continuous heal, which I think just ends up being a lot more healing than Tanix is offering. If you did already build her and she's working out for you, great. I think I have seen her used before. She's certainly usable. I just preferred to build out the rare because he only takes rare books for one thing, and I just enjoy using rares over epics when I can, if I can. So Tanix, okay, but kind of a mediocre champion in general, and I don't really see her getting any use outside of Faction Wars, so I can't really recommend her. Then we got Hellgazer. I don't think she's bringing a whole lot. She does have this decreased defense, a cleanse, extra turn. You see her in waves, but you don't really see her played anywhere else, and I wouldn't recommend her for Faction Wars either. Padma, you might have maxed one of these out for Clan Boss. In that case, she can definitely come into your team. She's a pretty good champion. She doesn't offer a ton for Faction Wars, but like I said, if you've already got one built, then you can probably get away with using her. She does have this decreased attack that can go AoE. She's got the decreased accuracy, which isn't the worst thing for Faction Wars. There are a lot of debuffs coming at you in Faction Wars, and if you didn't specifically max out your resistance for a team member, sometimes this can actually help them resist some stuff that they wouldn't have normally otherwise. And then she can also remove some buffs and steal them for herself. So can be used in Faction Wars. Not someone I would go out of my way to build specifically for Faction Wars, but not a bad champion at all in general. And then we come to another one of the champions that was on my team, and this is a fantastic champion for pretty much anywhere in the game where you need some CC, some control. She's great for Arena, and she's one of the faction MVPs for Faction Wars. Umbral Enchantress. So let's just start off with her A1. Attacks when enemy damage increases as HP decreases, and her HP is going to be decreasing because of this A3. Attacks all enemies, has a 80% chance applicable to 100 of a provoke for 2 turns, and 2-turn provokes are really nice. A lot of times it's just a 1-turn. She does have the longer version there, and it also puts an unkillable on her, and then she kind of locks herself out for 5 turns when she does this. So she is going to be taking a beating because she's going to provoke everyone into her, but she does get that unkillable, so that's nice. But you do need a way to heal her out of all that damage she's going to be taking, which is where Fellhound came in on my team. You can use him or somebody else, but just know if you're provoking everyone in onto her, you will need some healing for her. You can try to put her in lifesteal. She's not going to be hitting enemies for enough to really like fully heal herself just with a lifesteal set. So I know that Needless Mage, who's written that excellent guide that's available, he ended up putting her in a very fast regen set, which enabled her to almost solo the boss by herself. That's an option. Some Immortal, lifesteal, lots of options there, but I would probably say you're going to need some additional healing outside of just her kit. And then another fantastic ability she's got is another AoE, and it's got a 100% chance of placing a block debuff for 3 turns. So this is great for those Valk waves, keeps them from getting that counterattack up. Great for any other waves. If you've got her fast enough, you can place this block buffs first, and then before the enemy gets a chance to go, you can then cycle back around to her and then do the provoke. So even when the provoke wears off, they'll still have the block buffs on them as well. That is a good way to use her. So we'll just take a quick look at the gear that I've got on my team. You can see here Lord Shazar. He is not in the greatest gear. This is not an arena build. This was purely just for faction wars, and as you can see, I didn't even really max out a lot of his gear. He was just there to deal some damage and hopefully stay alive due to the lifesteal set. Not a great build, but it got the job done. Next up, we've got Umbral Enchantress. I did put her in a little bit of regen here and also a frost set to hopefully get some freezes off when everybody was provoked in and hitting her. She's got pretty good defense, good speed, almost max crit, and enough accuracy to land that provoke and the block buffs. Then we've got Nazana. Nazana is in a stun set. Again, pretty fast, good defense, abysmal attack. I wasn't looking for her to deal a lot of damage. It says she's an HP based champion, but all of her abilities do actually scale off of attack. It is difficult to get her dealing a lot of damage, and that probably shouldn't be what you focus on for her. She's mostly going to be there just to help your team survive, and also when she's in the stun set to lay out some CC for you. Then we've got Allure. Allure is very fast. She's in a relentless set, which is a great thing to put on her. When you get to the boss at the end, he will be placing irresistible freeze buffs on you. So unless you have a block debuffs up on your champions, there's really no way to get around that. And it's extremely helpful to keep him from going at all if you can. The relentless set gives you a little bit of extra insurance in case she does get frozen. You might get an extra turn and pop out of that freeze and just get up and running even faster for you. If she doesn't get frozen, she can keep the boss locked down the entire fight. Relentless is a great option for Allure in Fire Knight as well, pretty much anywhere. So if you've got the extra pieces, go ahead and throw that on her. And then you can see I also went with Immortal just for a little extra healing. And then our last champion here is going to be Fellhound. Fellhound also in a stun set. As you can see, I don't even have all this gear maxed, but it was enough to get the job done. Decent defense, nothing crazy. Some attack, again, nothing crazy. I just want him in there for the CC and the healing. He is going pretty fast, so he can have more opportunities to get those stuns out when he does his A1. But like I said, he's mostly there for that A2. So as you can see, the boss fight took me 26 minutes and 19 seconds to get done. I think that's one of the longer ones out of any of the factions that I completed, so I don't want to bore you going through that entire fight. As you can see, it's the gold boss, and if you do a search for the faction war bosses raid, you will find on Polarium's website a pretty good resource for what all the different faction bosses do. Shows you, at each different stage which boss it's going to be, and then it goes through the attacks and abilities that the boss has. As you can see, we've got the yellow boss for stage 21, and the things to look out for here are going to be what the adds do and then what the attacks are for the boss. For this boss, you definitely want to take out the adds first. They don't come back. The boss doesn't have any sort of revive mechanic for the adds. So you want to get rid of these two so they're not healing the boss and placing these increased speed, increased defense buffs on the boss. After you deal with them, then you just want to start laying into the boss, all the while kind of keeping the turn meter down as much as you can with the lure, and just keeping everybody healed up with Fellhound, and possibly placing that block damage buff if you can kind of guess who the boss is going to try to hit. Like I said before, he's got this 20% chance of placing a freeze debuff whenever he's hit, and you cannot resist that. So unless you've got block debuffs up, there's just going to be a chance that whoever is hitting the boss is going to get frozen. It doesn't matter how much resist you stack, that's just the way it is. So that's kind of one of the reasons that Relentless set is so good for Allure. And then his A1 and A2 are going to be just kind of basic attacks that can place fears or provokes. The provoke isn't as big a deal. The fear can be a real pain. It is a true fear, so you'll lose abilities for 2 turns if you use them, and that actually procs. But those are the abilities for the boss. It's one of the easier bosses in general, I would say. For Demonspawn, it's difficult if you don't have Duchess, just because if somebody goes down, you're kind of screwed for the 3 stars. But overall, I'd say the boss is one of the easier ones. You are going to have to deal with those Valk waves coming up to the boss, and that is more of the problem, I would say. But I'll just jump into a stage 20. As you can see, stage 21 took me almost a half an hour to do. Stage 20 I can auto in 3 minutes. So I definitely am not farming this every week. I just go ahead and get the team to a place where I can farm 20, and I'm satisfied with that. The difference between the drop rate of this 6-star glyph for 21 versus 20 is minimal or non-existent. There's been a little bit of research done on that, and it doesn't seem to be a huge deal which one of these 2 you're doing. There is a marginal increase as you're going up from 18, 19 to 20, and then there's probably a small increase for 21, but it's not really clear how much that is, if any. that definitely wasn't the smoothest of auto runs, but they did get the job done in 4 minutes 32 seconds. We got our glyph, we got our materials, and we'll take it. Hopefully you got to see some of the utility these champions are bringing. If you were controlling them manually, you would have had a lot better time there. You would have gotten to choose use the abilities a little more wisely and perhaps save them for the next wave instead of everybody blowing their abilities on the last enemy standing. But hey, that's what the AI does on auto, so what can you do? If this guide was helpful for you, please like and subscribe, and I will be making more videos on each of the different factions, so watch this space, and have a good one.